Let's talk about something a lot of us experience but don't always know what to do about driving as our eyes get older. But listen, this is not about giving up your keys. Not at all. This is about creating a smart, practical plan to keep you safe and, just as importantly, independent.
There's a specific kind of panic that shows up at dusk. You know that feeling, right? The road looks totally fine, your mind is sharp, but all of a sudden the headlights coming at you just bloom into these blinding camera flashes. Yeah, if that sounds familiar, you're in exactly the right place.
And right off the bat, I want to be super clear about this. You are not being dramatic. That feeling isn't in your head. It's not a failure of nerve. It is a real physical change in how our eyes process light as we age. And the good news is, it's something we can absolutely manage.
So what is actually going on here? Well, to get it, we have to look past the typical eye exam. It turns out being able to read letters off a chart, having 20/20 vision, doesn't really tell the whole story when it comes to driving safely.
See, this is where things often get missed. That eye chart only measures one thing, acuity, how well you see sharp letters that aren't moving. But driving? Driving is this constantly changing puzzle. It requires stuff like glare recovery, how fast your eyes readjust after seeing bright lights. It needs contrast sensitivity, so you can spot things in low light. And it definitely needs good depth perception to judge turns and merges. A standard eye chart just doesn't test for any of that.
So these challenges usually fall into four main trouble zones. First, there's glare, where headlights feel like they're exploding in your eyes. Then there's low light, where dusk can feel like you're driving through gray soup. Then you've got trouble with details, where signs and lane markings just seem to pop up at the last second. And finally, issues with depth perception, which is what makes judging a gap for a left turn feel so much harder than it used to.
You know, this story about a relative just nails the point. He could read the tiniest print on a medicine bottle, perfect acuity, but he completely missed seeing a gray pedestrian sign against a gray sky. And that wasn't carelessness, it was contrast. He couldn't distinguish the two shades of gray. Understanding that difference is everything. Okay, now for the really good part. There are some incredibly simple things you can do right now, today, that make a real difference. So let's run through a quick 10-minute car audit to find some of the easiest wins for better vision on the road. It is so easy to blame those super bright blue-white headlights on all the new cars, right? But before we do that, let's look a little closer to home. Because glare is a whole system, and a lot of the parts of that system are inside your own car, and totally within your control. So here are three dead simple steps. First, that thin, greasy film of haze on the inside of your windshield, it's a huge cause of glare, scattering like everywhere. So clean it really well. Second, look for reflections coming off a shiny dashboard. And third, and this sounds obvious but is crucial, clean your glasses. Smudges and dirts can literally multiply the size of the halos you see around lights. And hey, don't forget the outside of the car. If your headlight covers are all cloudy and yellowed, they don't just dim your own lights, they scatter the beam and create more glare for everybody else. Worn out wipers that just smear water around, that's a nightmare. And headlights that are aimed too high are a huge problem. These are all pretty easy fixes. All right, those quick fixes are a fantastic start. But now let's talk strategy, because this isn't about driving less, it's about driving smarter. The real goal here is to keep your independence by being strategic about when and where you get behind the wheel.
And this is the key mindset shift you have to make. We're not trying to shrink your world by telling you to drive less. No, it's about being really honest with yourself about the conditions where you perform your best, the time of day, the weather, the route, and then planning your trips around those strengths.
So how do you actually do that? Well, you start designing easier routes. Think like a pilot trying to reduce complexity. You plan your errands for the middle of the day. You stick to roads you know like the back of your hand. You start to prefer intersections that have a green arrow for left turns. And you do everything you can to avoid that triple threat: rush hour traffic, in the rain, at dusk. Here's a really helpful tool. It's a way to do a quick self-check with zero judgment. Just look at these two columns. If you find yourself nodding along with the items on the left, headlights causing big halos, dusk feeling tense, it might be a sign that a daylight-only plan is a smart move, at least for now. If you're firmly in the column on the right, your night vision feels good, no close calls, then you're probably in a great place. And if you do decide it's time to set a boundary, here's a simple one that works beautifully for a lot of people: the sunset rule. The plan is simply to be home before it gets dark. It's clear, it's easy to follow, and it completely removes that stressful last-minute should I or shouldn't I decision. It's not a punishment, it's just a plan. Now, this brings us to what can honestly be the toughest part of this whole thing, talking about it with family. The absolute key here is to approach it as building a plan together, not as starting a fight. Just think about the power in this small shift in language. The second you switch from saying you shouldn't be driving to asking, how can we make this easier for you? Everything changes. The defensiveness drops. The goal is not to win an argument. The goal is to keep a life and independence intact. How you start this conversation is everything. If you walk in and lead with a verdict like you can't drive anymore, I guarantee you've just started a fight. But if you start with a value, something you both agree on, like, I want you to be safe and independent for as long as possible, well, now you can start building a plan. And here's a really effective way to frame that plan: the step-down driving ladder. See, instead of a sudden, jarring stop, you just gradually remove the most challenging types of driving, one rung at a time. Maybe step 1 is just removing night driving. Step 2 could be avoiding highways in rush hour. Then unfamiliar routes, all while keeping those essential local daytime trips for as long as possible. And this is exactly why this approach works. An ultimatum is like being pushed off a cliff. It's sudden, it's terrifying, and it takes away all control. A ladder, on the other hand, offers a gradual, dignified plan. It keeps the driver in control of the transition. Always, always choose the ladder. Okay, let's wrap this all up. What is the single safest, most concrete action you can take today to move forward? Here it is, a super simple, 2-part action plan. First, schedule an eye exam, and when you make the appointment, be specific. Tell them, I want to talk about issues with glare and night driving. Second, go out to your car right now and do that 10-minute audit we talked about. Clean your glass inside and out. It really is that simple. I want to leave you with this one thought. The anxiety that comes from just not knowing what's going on or what you should do, that's often way worse than the actual problem. Uncertainty is loud. A plan, even a very small one, is much quieter. So, the final question to ask yourself is this. Looking at that ladder, which rung keeps you the safest and the most independent, starting today? Just thinking about that question is the first and most important step.